The average person eats about 35 tons of food a year, which is equivalent to 35,000 kilograms or around 73,000 pounds. Pretty interesting fact, isn't it? So we obviously spend quite a bit of time going out and buying the food and also preparing the food as well. So it's a pretty, important topic, but what's more important is how we cook our foods so we can get the most nutrition. They do say you are what you eat. And the famous Socrates said, let food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. Very profound statement. So it is a subject that's pretty close to my heart, or if I'm going to be geographically correct, probably closer to my stomach, I should say. And I was very fortunate. I spent about 10 to 12 years with a kitchen nutrition company. And what we did is we actually did seminars and we showed people, the proper methods, or the better methods, I should say, of cooking our foods and preserving not just the flavor, guys, but the nutrition as well. And we actually did experiments. It took us about 2-3 hours. And we had a lot of fun. We cooked foods and dinner as well. And people could see the difference and taste it as well. And we used to even condense the water down to syrup later on to show people, what happened when we used too much water. So I haven't got time to share all of that with you, but I'm going to share with you some of the more important bits that we did. This was about 15 years ago. So, hopefully I can remember the important stuff. I'm sure I will. Okay, so let's get started. So to understand the healthiest cooking methods, as it says here, we first must understand the enemies of food preparation. Because face it, we spend a lot of time, like I said before, making sure we choose the freshest foods, as it shows here. In many cases, organic, so they can be free of pesticides and chemicals. And then we take them to probably one of the most important places is our stovetop, our oven, which is going to determine how much flavor and, more importantly, nutrition is going to be in there. Okay, so to understand what's the best methods to cook our foods, we first must understand what are the enemies of food preparation. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple. There's basically 3 that destroy most of the nutrition, and that's too much air, too much heat, and too much water. Okay, most people know that air causes oxidation and destroys vitamins and minerals as well. Okay, and that's why food goes off as well. That's why we try to keep it sealed. But with less air in there, then it lasts for a longer period of time. But also with the air, guys, and especially when you combine it associated with water, we start to get nutrients in the water, which I'll explain in more detail. Then they go up into the air and they escape in the atmosphere. And that's why we can smell our foods. I mean, face it, if you're cooking and you can smell that food in the air, what's happening? You're not losing just water, because water doesn't smell. You're losing part of those nutrients in the food. So there is cooking methods where you can actually seal all that flavor in your foods, and I'll talk a bit more. But heat, guys, is one of the ones that destroys most of your nutrients. Heat, excessive heat, I should say, destroys most vitamins and minerals. And technically speaking, those that, a little bit more knowledgeable on this, there are some foods which, with a little bit of heating, a little bit, I should add, not excessive, it actually adds nutrition. Things like cabbage, mushrooms, spinach, tomatoes, for example, which contain lycopene. If you cook them, you get a bit more lycopene from the tomatoes, which is great for fighting cancer, etc. You lose some of the other nutrients, but you a little bit of heat, but not too much. Okay. Most of our nutrition, and I'd like you to remember this, is probably the most important thing out of the whole seminar. We lose most of our vitamins and minerals after the temperature of around 86 to 87 degrees Celsius. Okay, around there is where we start to lose most of the nutrition. Okay, and what do we cook at mostly when we're cooking at boiling point? Over 100 degrees Celsius. Same with the oven, same with microwave oven, same with pressure cooking, etc. They're all the wrong methods of cooking. They use extremely high heat. Now, technically speaking, we need other things. If it's not just vitamins and minerals, we need enzymes. You cannot have any chemical reaction that enzymes. Our body can produce some enzymes, but we get a lot of our foods from our foods too, and they do start to get destroyed after a certain temperature. Basically, around 47 to 49 degrees, we start to destroy a lot of enzymes. So again, try to keep that temperature as down as possible, okay? And water, guys. A lot of vitamins and minerals are water soluble. So what happens? They go in the water and then we lose them, okay? So technically speaking, you should not be using water unless you are doing a soup where you're gonna actually drink that water as well. And again, keeping that temperature under that 86 to 70 degrees. And that's why they say slow cooking is the best, if you can, one period of time sealed in there, okay? So hope that makes sense. But before I talk about these enemies of preparation, how you can avoid them, let's also look at another important subject, probably just as important, if not more, what cookware to definitely avoid and why, okay? And this might surprise or shock some people, but aluminium or aluminum, as they say in the US, and Teflon are two of the most dangerous cookware that you could ever use. I'd be throwing them out, okay? And I'm going to show you why in a moment. And like I said, it's probably going to shock a few people. I predict, to be honest, in the future, many years to come, that these would ban, just like we banned aluminium and, just like we banned lead in paints and asbestos, for example, in houses, or aluminium in deodorants. A lot of the underarm deodorants, they banned it. Why? Because they're worried that aluminium might get through our skin into our body. What about when we're cooking with a cookware? It's going straight into our bodies. And, this is an example of aluminium cookware. And I used to, like I said, do these demonstrations. People ask me advice. What do you think? I'm using this cookware. How do you compare it? And I used to look at it and they say, well, do you notice these holes or pitting, as they say? And they go, yeah. I go, what do you think's happened to that? He goes, where's it gone? And they used to scratch their head and go, yeah, it's gone into our foods. Now, is aluminium something your body needs? And many would know about this stuff. Even doctors, they were the best ones with a look on their face because doctors know about aluminium is toxic, but they never ever, thought that the cookware was made from aluminium. Well, they did really. If they looked at the label, it's made from aluminium, but they never had ever put two and two together. So most of them would throw it out. And I would show people how they could do their own experiments and taste the food and see, what's going into their bodies. For example, if you just cook potatoes without any other flavorings or colorings or spices in there, you'll start to see with many of these cookware grayish tinge around the potato because potatoes, even mashed potato, they absorb one of the highest rates of aluminium from cookware. Even bicarb or baking soda, I used to put that in there just on its own with water and see how much it reacts because people use that in their cooking for their recipes, okay? You cannot taste that water after 15 minutes. And people used to dip their finger in and put it in. I swear, you want to vomit after you taste that. And I say, well, that's what's been going into your food. But with all the sauces and flavors, you don't see it or taste it. And that's why if you Google online, you'll see aluminium is linked to Alzheimer's disease. It's linked to osteoporosis. It's linked to so many other things, neurodegenerative diseases, because it affects your brain cells. It affects everything. Now, here's an interesting fact. Although they're saying, oh, you can't prove that aluminium causes Alzheimer's disease, okay, because it's very hard to say, well, that's the definitive cause. 90% or just about every patient that had Alzheimer's disease that did autopsies has a large accumulation of aluminium in the brain. And aluminium is toxic to brain cells. So come on, guys. I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm not stupid either. It makes sense. Aluminium is not something we need in our bodies. Talk to your doctor and go for a blood test and say, what's my levels of iron, zinc, copper? He'll give you certain levels. You don't need too much of certain things because they can be toxic, but you need those in your body. Ask him, what's my aluminium level? How much have I got? He'll say, what? You crazy? You don't need aluminium. Aluminium is one of the most reactive metals when you look at chemistry, but it's toxic, along with mercury. Okay, so again, I hope I've given you some food for thought, as the pun says there. And Teflon, guys, this is one that's a little bit harder to pick up because Teflon, it is toxic as well. And we all know the coating that it's made from is a very, it's not a compound that's safe to be in your body, right? So we all know it comes off. Some of it's coming off, it's going into your foods. I just take a napkin and I rub it on the Teflon. You can see little pieces come off black, no matter how well it's been cleaned. And guess what's underneath the Teflon when it starts coming off, which happens to all the cookware and nobody throws it away right away? Aluminium, same as this pan. That's coming through to your foods as well. But even worse is there's warning labels on most of this cookware which says when you heat up the coating, it can emit fumes that could be harmful to you or your bird, and that's from the coating. right? And even some cookware have got, when they give you the warranty, it's got pages. This is from a warranty book, which says keep your birds away from your cookware because the toxic gases can kill them. It enlarges their livers and they suffocate, okay, from the toxic fumes. Birds are a little bit more sensitive than humans and detect these poisonous gases before we can. And it says it here. They causes wheezing, seizures, etc. And you know, even at normal temperatures, here's another warning, at normal heating temperatures, Teflon and other non-stick coatings emit toxic gases and particles that can result in severe lung damage and death in birds and can result in flu-like symptoms in humans, including sore throat, fever, chills, shortness of breath, tightness of chest, headache, and the list goes on, guys. This hasn't got all the side effects. But again, people think that a company wouldn't sell them something if it was toxic. That's not true. And that's why I'm doing this website, because I want to educate people so they can research themselves and obviously spend their valuable dollar on something that's going to improve their health, not destroy it, okay? You might have heard the saying, most people would have heard of the saying, the canary in the coal mine, right? Because in the old days, what they used to do, they used to carry these canaries because they had no machines to detect the poisonous toxic gases, which used to kill humans if they stayed there too long. So they used to take the birds down there. And what happened was, when the birds started, you know, wheezing or dying, or they saw they were getting sick, they used to run out of the coal mines because they knew there was toxic fumes. Shouldn't we be doing the same thing from our cookware when there's a warning label that says keep your birds away from the cookware? We should be doing the same thing. So again, I hope that makes sense. So what's the safest? Moving on, guys, the safest is stainless steel. Okay, by far. Why don't a lot of people use stainless steel? Because of a few reasons. One of them is it's more expensive, right? Stainless steel is a stronger metal. It's not going to react with some of the foods you cook in there. And I can tell you now, if you Google online, you see experiments where they cook foods in aluminium compared to stainless steel, and you see some foods have 500 times the amount of aluminium, you know, many 10, 20, or even 30 times. If you want these documents, just email me, leave them in the comments box. I'll send those PDFs for you. But crazy, you know, the difference in aluminium. So stainless steel is good, but it's not a good conductor of heat. That's the problem. Okay, so if you will need to find cookware, it'll have stainless steel on the outside and on the inside of the cookware. And I've got an example here, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And there'll be a lot of layers in between. Okay, so what is the best form? It's the T304. There's 18A, there's 1810 stainless steel, then there's 304. The T304, which I'm showing you here, which I've got myself, and I've made sure my family, and I've bought an extra set for my daughter, because this particular one is not available anymore. I'll explain it in a moment. The T304 is surgical stainless steel. It's the highest grade of stainless steel that can be molded into cookware, and it is used for surgeries. That's why they call it surgical stainless steel. For the instruments that doctors use are hip replacements, body parts, etc., because it's going to last a lifetime. And this is about 25 years old, and we use it and abuse it, as they say, and it should come up the same way just by using hot water. I can't explain everything here in a few minutes, but the burns don't go into the surface. They stay on top and it comes up with hot water, etc. But I'm just going to talk about more the nutrition side of cooking. And what I'll do is I'll enlarge that. There we go. Maybe we can see it. So the problem, like I said before, is the heating. You will find certain layers in between. If you want a better quality cookware, they'll usually have a thicker base with maybe one layer in between. This has got 7 layers, this one here on the bottom, and a few layers coming up. You won't be able to find anything like that. I haven't seen anything online. I think it just got a bit too expensive to manufacture, because there's a lot of factors which go into once you start putting metals together, without again going too technical, because different metals expand at different ratios, and if you don't put certain metals together and bind them properly, they can fall apart. So that's why, you know, it costs a little bit more, but you do get the benefits because it's even heating. You don't have to stir and all that sort of stuff. Okay, but if you want a good cookware that's going to distribute the heat more evenly, try to find some like this, and it's got to have at least a metal that heats in between. And aluminium is a good conductor of heat. Doesn't matter if it's got aluminium, as long as it's in between the stainless steel. Okay, or silver, copper, carbon. That, you know, but mostly the aluminium because it's cheaper, and that's okay as long as it's in between. Make sure it comes up on the side. If you, again, you want to go to little bit of a bigger budget, it'll cost you a little bit more, but it's great because it spreads the heat evenly, okay? So, but more importantly, make sure it's waterless. So this, ask for cookware that doesn't require any water, at the most a tablespoon of water, because the food should cook in its own natural juices. One of the most important parts is make sure it's got some sort of a temperature system, what we call temptone or a gauge. So this has been designed to whistle at 83 degrees Celsius. 83, why? Because most of the nutrition is lost at 86 to 87. So again, look for some cookware that cooks under that 86 to 87 degrees. And again, without getting too technical, most of the bacteria mostly multiplies between 4 degrees and 65 degrees. That's why we freeze our foods or we cook them over that temperature. That's most of the bacteria. Some bacteria that can even survive under at 100 degrees. So, you know, that's why it's safe to cook at over 65 degrees and make sure it's under 86 to 87. Now, there'll be a whistle, which is so easy to use because you can cook, you know, and be in another room, and if you forget, you just listen to the whistle. Now, make sure the whistle operates not when you blow air out, because if you blow air out, see that? Make sure it operates when you suck the air in, because that's, can you hear that? That's called vacuum cooking or semi-vacuum cooking. So what happens is, getting a little bit more technical, is, you know, when the air pressure starts to get high on the outside, and there's a vacuum you start to cause on the inside, what happens? High pressure runs to low pressure. So that starts going in. That's when the whistle should operate. If it operates the other way, it's pressure cooking, which operates on high heat, which is not good, remember? So again, a couple of things. I'm going through it quickly, but if people want to ask questions later on, just leave it in the comments and I can always make another video or get, you know, answer questions for people. So what you do is, once it whistles, you lower it, and it'll keep cooking. You just have to put on low heat. Again, there'll be different types of cookware that might need a little bit more than others, depending on the layers. And then it cooks at low heat under that 86 to 87. No air going in or out if it's got a good vacuum seal. This particular one, once you close the valve, the vacuum starts to form, and this thing, you won't be able to pull it off after, because it's going to cause a vacuum and suck it out, especially when the temperature cools down. If you haven't got a lot of food in, you wouldn't be able to lift the whole cookware off the thing. Okay, that's how good the vacuum are. So again, there's different types of cookware that have different seals. A lot of other stuff to cookware as well. Like I said, it used to take me a lot more time to explain it, but even the handles, making sure you keep them away from the cookware so they don't heat up, the shape of the handles, even the edges, if they're rounded, you can pull foods out. So again, if somebody's really interested in a really good cookware, knowing more, just, you know, leave the comments below or contact me and I'll give you more. So that's it there, guys. I gave you a little bit more information on the good type of cookware, but to keep it simple, I'm going to go back to these 3 enemies of food preparation. So keeping it simple, guys, just remember these 3 enemies: air, heat of 86 to 87 degrees, and water. That's it. And if you do that, I can tell you now the food's going to be tasting a lot better, and you'll be providing a lot more nutrition to your children as well. You know, just remember, cooking is something we're going to do, you know, all through our lives. It takes up a big portion and time, but it's not hard to do, especially if you invest a little bit more and you get the right cookware. I'm not going to promote any sort of cookware because I don't know. I've been out of it 15 years. I have looked online on Amazon and that. There are some really good quality cookware, and some with the temptone systems, and have got those features in. So, you know, if you find something, just send it to me and I can always evaluate it for you if you want. Or if somebody finds something good, we can maybe share it later and compare. You know, that's fine. But the main point is, whatever you do, your children are going to do as well. And we really have to educate our kids, because people are eating out more, they're getting takeaway foods, and this is the first generation which they predicted, and not even predicted, they're seeing the parents are outliving their kids, because their kids today in the last 15, 20 years are just, you know, eating all these terrible foods with hardly any nutrition and, you know, all these other chemicals, etc. And remember, no one's going to prepare your food the way you would. And I know that because one of my other businesses was a seafood business where I used to actually even cook food for people. And although I took really good care, it was one of the best businesses in our area, it's still, I know, I never ever, you know, could take care of the food as well as I did for myself and my family. Because face it, you're going to spend that extra care, okay? So make cooking fun, guys. I love cooking now. I love, you know, teaching the next generation as well how to cook. And my motto is just learn, laugh, and cook. And not necessarily in that order either, okay? And like I said, have fun, enjoy meals, you know, sit together with your family, you know, talk about the day, or, you know, or with your friends, what's happened the last few weeks, month, you know, because it is enjoyable. And just always remember, you know, have fun. And my last message to you is happy cooking.